Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role-playing games. I'm Chris Salzman.
And I'm Andy Rowe.
So I'm laughing because right before we started, I had the intro all like queued up and I was going. I had like high energy, and Andy stopped me mid-sentence and had to stir his tea. Yeah, so we took another run at it. I think we're good.
I feel like I'm being thrown under the bus here.
Yeah, again, I think I did this last week as well, so maybe we'll cut this out. Yes, so Andy, we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're not going to roll on the table, so if you came to listen to us roll on the table, I'm sorry, this is going to be yet another one of those episodes where we don't. But we were
Sound
talking
of a million people like scrambling to hit stop on their podcast.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think it'll be ultimately a worthwhile episode to listen to, so we're going to dive into a topic that we were just talking about before we hit record, and that's like we're both feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome at the moment because I don't think neither of us are really running games at the moment, and that feels weird. I want to say. At a certain point, you need to like stop blaming the pandemic, I think, for what's going on, and kind of look deep within yourself and say like, well, you know, what's going on here with this. So I'm going to open it up and we'll talk about some specific stuff. But I know for me, I think a lot of what I've run lately, I think, has been like podcast related stuff. If it comes down to it. I mean, so we had the con recently, so I ran something there, and then on the podcast we played the ground itself, and we played some other stuff for the Summer of Experiments, so that's mostly what I ran there. I'm trying to remember the last thing I ran in person that wasn't related to the podcast, and I don't remember it. I think it was a year ago, almost to the day, where I did some Halloween stuff. Some Halloween one-shots. But yeah, so I think that's sort of where I'm at right now. And it's odd because when we started the podcast, I was running 2 games that met pretty regularly, right? This was a couple years ago at this point. But yeah, I was, running 2 games that was meeting pretty regularly. Like, I had plans to do other stuff. I was doing one-shots all the time as well. Yeah, and now to sort of see that dwindle, it's like, it's both sad and it's also just sort of the reality of what's going on with my life, I think, at this point. All that to say, I'm trying to get a group together to run a one-shot for Halloween. But then after that, I have maybe a couple other like holiday things planned, but I don't really have like and then in 2022, I'm starting up a big campaign of, Curse of Strahd or whatever. Yeah, so that's where I'm at. I guess, what about you, Andy? What's been going on with your gaming life?
Something similar. I haven't run anything in a while. The last real regular game I was running was my Band of Blades campaign, which ran from the beginning of the year, roughly, I think, to about midsummer. And then I put that on pause because, basically, for scheduling reasons. Mm-hmm. That's been on pause for a while, and I keep meaning to kind of circle back and get that going again, but it just hasn't happened yet. Like life has been busy. And then even when that was running, I mean, that was a monthly game. We met once a month online for just a couple of hours. And that's not a lot of time in the month spent, playing this hobby that consumes much of my thought and imagination, yes. In a typical week or a typical day for that matter. Mm-hmm. And right now I haven't run anything for a while. And I do have kind of plans and hopes. What GM doesn't, right? What GM isn't always like thinking what they're going to run next. Mm-hmm. I do have plans and hopes, but the campaign I want to run, I'm not sure if I'll be able to pull it off. I want to do it right, and it needs the right players and the right level of commitment from everybody. So, I'm not sure. That could well happen like later this year or the beginning of the next year, or it might not. So I guess I'm kind of babbling in response, but yeah, I feel the same way. And this isn't the first time that, I've gone a stretch of time without really doing a lot of gaming. Mm-hmm. And it is always kind of a curious feeling. So I guess I don't have any other insights right now. So yeah, how would you react?
There's something you said that I think really stuck out to me, which is, it's a hobby that sort of consumes you and you're thinking about it all the time. That resonates with me. And I think with probably everybody who's listening to this podcast, right? It's like, It is the sort of thing, like, once you play role-playing games, and once you're really invested in it, I think it tinges almost anything you're consuming media-wise, right? And consuming is a awful word, I think, when you associate it with like, like content and stuff. But, like when you're watching stuff, when you're reading things, you're sort of like always thinking in the back of your mind, like, oh, this would be really cool at the table, right? Like, or this wouldn't work at the table. Yeah. It's just there, and this is like a silly thing, but my parents were in town visiting and they saw my collection of dice. They didn't even see the full extent of it, right? But they saw a part of it. They're like, what do you use all those for? They were just like, why would you need more than one D6 in your life? But it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, this is like what I do, right? Like this is, yeah. I mean, there's 4 stacks of random, role playing books like behind me. There's some on the bookshelf, stuff like that. It just like permeates everything that you do. Everything you think about. And throughout the week, we're constantly having conversations and Discord and things like that about running games, gaming news, and all this stuff. And, like, heck, we record a podcast every couple of weeks about running games and talk to people about that as well. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that's like where the imposter syndrome pops up. You're just like, well, I mean, we're doing all this, but like, are you actually playing? Like, are you running games? And, the answer is sort of like, no, but yes, right? Like, not actually, but constantly thinking about it, constantly planning about the next thing that we're going to do.
Yeah, if I can zoom out from us to kind of, to take kind of a bigger perspective, I've always had this sense being involved in this hobby. There has always been kind of this sneery attitude towards people that talk about games, but don't actually play them or don't actually run them. I think I've internalized some of that as well, this sort of embarrassment about being into games, but sometimes going for stretches of time without really running or playing in them. I think some people would even point to types of games that are influenced by an awareness that many of the people who buy them are just kind of read them or, quote, consume them, to use that terrible term that you introduced.
Yes, sorry.
I can't point to you where I read this, but somewhere I remember reading one of the people, the higher ups at Paizo, saying on a forum, the venture paths that they publish, and they publish a new installment like every month, almost like a magazine, are like 50% played and 50% run. So don't quote me on that number. It does make me think that, as weird as it feels, I don't think we're alone in having big stretches of time where our main interaction with the hobby is like thinking about it or passively kind of, quote, consuming it by reading a book or like participating in a forum or something like that.
Yeah, I would say there's also nothing like we've said it a lot, like Roll for Topic in particular is not interested in gatekeeping, right? So like I don't care how often anyone runs a game. And I think they're like, even if we, like even if we're actively running games and stuff like that, I mean, I think there still is that like that pack rat tendency. You're always acquiring new PDFs and games and stuff, even though like you're never going to run them. Like I'm thinking specifically about, and I talked about on the podcast for a while, I was like super pumped to run a Cyberpunk campaign. I think we even like talked about it. Like I bought a bunch of books and stuff, and just like somewhere in there, the energy for that ran out. Right. So now I have a handful of Cyberpunk books, and I think I have the Jumpstart kit for Cyberpunk 2077. So I've been like, it's not going to happen, and I guess it's okay, but it also feels maybe a little silly to keep on like accumulating ideas and source books and things like that. It's like if you're not going to run them, but I also really love it. It's just like it's this very complicated setup. It's really like it's a complicated set of emotions, and I think you have this with anything that you feel a little bit of imposter syndrome about. It's like to even have that, I think you need to care about the thing that you're having the imposter syndrome about, and to know a little bit about it as well, right? So like that's sort of the baseline. Like I'm rambling, but I think this is important to sort of ramble this out a bit. This is not us quitting the podcast or quitting the hobby, right? Like I think that's
for sure. Yeah.
That should be like really. Hopefully, that's super clear. This is not like we're not like breaking up with with Dungeons and Dragons. Although maybe we should, but like it's like it's still something like we want to do, right? And like we want to get back to it, and like I think I will blame the pandemic a little bit, in that like it'd be way easier if it could happen simply in person. And could have been happening for a while. But yeah, maybe it's just a season, right? We get through it, and then like pretty soon we're complaining that we have too many games going on.
Yeah, for sure. And there is that seasonal element to it. I don't for a moment think that I won't be running or playing stuff in the future. You know, it's just that right now it's not really happening. I wanted to say, I don't think the hobby is unique in this, but it is remarkable to me the extent to which you can really enjoy role-playing games without playing them.
Yeah.
Something about the end product, like a role-playing book or a manual or something like that. It's not quite the same type of enjoyment you get from like reading a novel, but there is something kind of neat about reading it, and even reading the rules or reading about a setting and mulling it over in your mind as you read and thinking about what you could do or what you might change and reacting like, oh, I don't like this, I do like that. I don't know, I don't really get that experience from other hobbies, I guess. I don't know. I was trying to think, like, is there an analog, like, if you're like really into sports or something like that, whatever your hobby is, is there a version of this where you're like, is there a version of being into sports but like kind of not really participating in an active way,
Yeah.
And I can't think of a good analogy. I mean, if you're really into playing soccer but you never played soccer,
Yeah.
I mean, that would be a little weird, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, you could watch other people play soccer and you could still say, I really love soccer. And everyone would be, that's cool. I like,
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I mean, and here I am rambling here too, but in this kind of current era where Critical Role and others of these big shows have, I think, broadened the audience for D&D, I do think it is maybe more possible now than it has ever been to kind of soak in the world of D&D and role-playing games without ever actually rolling the dice and have it be something that's gratifying and interesting and compelling to you.
Yeah, it's almost like a lifestyle brand, right? Like, it's like I was at the farmer's market over the weekend and I saw I probably saw 2 or 3 people that had like D&D flavored t-shirts on, right?
Yeah.
It's like stuff like that where it's like, that's not playing the game, but it's also sort of putting your foot, like putting a line in the sand, like I'm into this, right? Like, yeah. So you're doing that. I listen to actual play podcasts every once in a while. Like I'm playing in games too, right? Like, I play in games. I'm just not actively running stuff right now. Yeah, and like I mentioned before, like always generating ideas and stuff. Your sports analogy I think is a really good one, because like how many people who watch football on the weekends actually play football, but they're still football fans. It's like, yeah.
And you wouldn't question it or say, whoa, you're like a fake, you're not doing this hobby right,
Yeah.
Now, that said, it is not my goal to be kind of like a lifestyle fan of D&D or something. I've never felt super, I enjoy a witty D&D t-shirt as much as everybody else, but for me, part of feeling the imposter syndrome, or part of having this feeling, is like I am not quite ready to just say, yeah, I'm just going to be kind of a fan of this.
Yeah.
My goal with this hobby is to do it, to play it, to run it,
Yeah.
So while I'm glad that there's a bigger window for people to enjoy the wonderful, imaginative world of role-playing in ways that don't necessarily mean you're actually rolling the dice, for me, this hobby does come down, like at the end, for me personally, to rolling dice at a table or on a virtual tabletop, I guess.
And I would say my goals are pretty similar, although I think I might come at it a little bit differently. I mean, I think like I really enjoy playing games, but I think the thing that it engages for me is like a creative side. When I feel like me, Chris, am GMing well, what's happening is there's like this like generative creativity that's happening between me and the players at the table. A lot of yes-anding, and there's a story and interesting stuff happening, right? To me, like that's sort of the end goal, right? And like, so if I'm getting that through reading or participating in discussions and stuff, like to me, that's scratching like somewhat of the itch, right? But it's not the complete experience either.
One other thing, thinking back to the kind of consumer consumption idea that we talked about a few minutes ago, part of my feeling of like feeling slightly bad about not running or playing games is linked to the fact that I have just I've spent a lot of money on this over the years.
Yes.
And it's not like I'm not, or the role playing hobby, you're not buying yachts or, spending thousands each month on golf or whatever gear, but it adds up. And, and there, I have more books and more junk accumulated in my house than I wish I did, honestly. Mm-hmm. And, I know you and I and some of the other people in our community have actually done a fair amount of talking of like, how do you trim down your collection when you get to a point where you really just don't want all of the stuff anymore. So there is a little bit of that element. Like, in my house, we had our basement flooded a couple of weeks ago. So part of the process of kind of clearing that out was moving up all of my role-playing books that were down there and within range of the flooded area, right? So we hauled them up. So right now, our living room is like stacked high. I mean, there's stacks. There's stacks of books on filling up our living room table, and some are stacked on the ground. And when I walk by that and I think, Andy, how many games did you run in 2021? And like, look at all those books sitting there. It's not a good feeling, and it maybe it's just an American first world like queasiness with the fact that we spend so much on our hobbies and stuff like that. But I don't know, just in the sake of total transparency here, I feel bad a little bit. It's a conflicted sort of bad about just all this stuff I've accumulated that I'm not really using.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to go back to what you said about, we're not buying yachts or spending thousands of dollars on golf, and just say that we have the moral high ground here, right? Because we're not spending as much money.
Yeah. Did you hear that? We are better than other hobbyists.
We're better than,
That's
Pick
right.
a hobby. We're better.
Yeah. Okay. I should throw out the disclaimer. If you buy yachts or you spend thousands on golf, I actually don't know how much it costs to like maintain a golf hobby. I like to think it's like a ludicrously high amount so that I can feel better about my hobby expenditures. So please don't tell me you can golf on like $100 a year. I don't want to hear that.
I don't want to hear it either, and I don't want to buy your book.
Yeah, whatever your hobby is, like, I'm not judging you. Trust me, you could, if you looked and saw the stack of game books in the other room, you would see I cannot judge anyone for what they invest in their hobby.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I was looking at our bookshelves recently, and I was thinking about how we need to add another one, and then I was thinking that we need to add another one because I need to stop buying books. Right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. My wife has said similar things. Like, oh, we should get another bookshelf, and it's like, but if I do that, I'll have to admit I have so many books that we need another bookshelf, and I'm not ready to make that confession yet. Yeah,
and I've been down that road before, and it's it just feeds the addiction, because then you have more room. Because right, like, that's the thing with bookshelves, is like you can fit a lot on them, and so then you're like, well, now I got the room for it. You gotta fill it up. Yeah. So in some way, I mean, it's nice to have PDFs that you can immediately forget about buried in your inbox.
Circling back, so if we are experiencing, a little bit of imposter syndrome, maybe we aren't the best suited to do this. But if someone came to you and felt that way and said to you, I am really experiencing imposter syndrome, I haven't gamed in forever, I really want to, I feel bad, what would you say to them?
Oh, I would say, and this is just like one of those, like, I know better, right? I would say to them, like, no, like, you're great, like, you're a GM, like, you play games, like, you're just not playing games right now, and that's totally fine. Yeah. If you feel bad about that, what you should do is just put together a one shot, or like, let's play something right now, so you can say that I played through an encounter, right? Yeah. Like, you did something today, right? Like, there's this concept of 1% better that I like, although I rarely follow it, like, where you, rather than trying to get 100% better in one day at a thing, you just focus on doing like one thing, 1% better every day, and then over time, all of a sudden, you're way better. So I like that concept a lot, and I think that the GM advice for that to someone who's experiencing imposter syndrome is like, well, yeah, just do one small thing, like, it'll be okay. Yeah, I mean, I should take that advice myself, right, and just just run a one shot, like, kind of get it out of my system, and then see what happens from there. But what would you say to someone who said that?
I would say something similar. The fact that we feel bad about it is not, I think, because it's like an inherently bad thing. It's because we bring certain expectations. Society puts expectations about how we should be spending our time, how we should be spending our money. It's a judgy feeling. you know, this feeling of imposter syndrome is us judging ourselves. And I think everybody just in general could stand to just be a little easier on themselves. So I think my advice might be, do what brings you joy and what satisfies you, and don't worry so much about whether you are meeting somebody else's criteria for are you doing it right. So I don't even know if I would say go out there and run a game. I think I might be more inclined to say if this is like causing you real stress, there's probably something more going on that you should probably spend some time grappling with. The fact that you've let a hobby become a source of stress because you aren't engaging with it in the right way or with the frequency that you think you ought to. And having figured that out, maybe then come back to the table and run some one-shots or get that campaign going. But ultimately, if it's not just a passing thing, if the feeling of imposter syndrome, I think everyone kind of experiences it to one degree from time to time. So I don't think you should panic if you go through a season of it, like maybe you and I are now. But, you know, if this is a thing that sticks with you for a really long time, I don't know. Talk that out with a therapist or a friend or a spouse or something, you know?
Yeah. So Andy, but what if you have a podcast that you
Yeah,
record?
well, if you have a podcast, then you...
Yeah.
then, yeah, I guess we haven't talked about that, but how ludicrous it sometimes feels to be doing a podcast if I haven't played recently, you know? It's kind of fun.
Yeah. Just to address that a little bit, I mean, I hope this is coming through, like, right, we're gonna publish this conversation on the internet. Right. Like, so that's going to take a certain amount of, like, I'm not going to call it courage because it's like, whatever, right. It's a podcast episode. Like it's fine to put that out there. But I mean, I think the reason we want to have this conversation is because my suspicion is that lots of people feel this, right. Yeah. In some way or another, you know, you feel that. And I think it's really easy to maybe listen to a favorite podcast or, you know, like hear someone speak and be like, oh, well, they have it all together and they are meeting some sort of criteria for whatever I think is a good GM, right? Like, right. And like that criteria is they're running 2 games a week and they're, you know, meeting every time and everybody's always happy, right? Like, you know, like it's probably that picture isn't correct of whoever you're looking at and thinking about that for. I mean, other than like, you know, other than certain people, right, who are perfect, but like, right, like it's like it's sort of like it's okay, right? And I think like in part we're recording this and we're going to publish it, so later on we can both listen back to it, you know, in 10 years and be like, oh, remember back then when it felt like, yeah, you know, like how dare we like not run a game in what it's like 3 months or something like that, like, you know, how dare we do that, and then also, you know, decide to dispense some sort of advice to people. And it's like, well, I mean, it turns out like we've run games, like some of that advice still holds, like we can still have these conversations like that. So I hope this is helpful rather than just like, I don't know, delete the podcast if you need to, unsubscribe, but like, you know, that's on you. But I would hope that you'd stick around, because I mean, like, I don't think this is not going to be a forever like setup for us where we're both just morose and impostered.
Yeah, if we do mope around for more than like 2 episodes in a row, please, I don't know, find us and slap us or something like that.
Yeah.
That's definitely not the intent here. So yeah, maybe we can why don't we wrap up our chat here? And this is usually we do kind of our what's been up with you banter at the beginning of the episode, but I have a quick thing I wanted to run past you that might help me break out of the imposter syndrome doldrums here. But,
okay, yeah, let's hear it.
Do you have any closing thoughts on imposter syndrome?
No, I don't think I have any, and I'm not going to try to be witty this week.
Yeah,
just don't have it in me. Yeah. I
guess I don't have anything truly insightful either, except I really do hope if you're listening and you are feeling bad, you know, about this or something else related to the hobby, you know, just go easy on yourself, man. We are getting to the point where I do feel increasingly sheepish blaming the pandemic, as you say, for whatever, but you've still got some time to blame the pandemic. So laugh about the pandemic, and then just go easy on yourself.
I do, like, I mean, I sometimes forget that I also have welcomed a second child into the world. So,
there's that too.
Yeah.
You know, little things like that.
Yeah, just really tiny things you need attention.
Yes. I guess in closing, I wanted to say, so I wanted to ask you, are you thinking about doing something gamey for Halloween? Like running a game or playing in a game? And if so,
Yeah.
what is that?
Yeah, so I did allude to this earlier, like in the episode. So I'm trying to get a group together to run like a one shot ish, maybe 2-session Halloween game of some sort. I think some of them might listen to the podcast, so I'm not going to go into too many details about it. But yeah, it'll be Strahd related, I think is the hope. Because I think that's a good Halloween thing. The other thing I was thinking about, a couple years ago, I ran a Kids on Bikes game.
Yeah.
It was one shot, which was super fun. I just I pulled that book down off the shelf earlier tonight. Actually, I was just flipping through it and just remembering how much I love the world building in that game. Yeah, so if you're listening to this and looking for like a good one shot, I would say maybe a longer one shot. It's going to take you 4 or 5 hours to play through something. Kids on Bikes, I would highly recommend. But yeah, what about you? Do you have anything planned for Halloween?
Yeah, I am getting ready to run a spooky one shot for my oldest kid's high school RPG club.
Yeah.
So they're having a spooky one shot day. I'm hoping that there will be a lot of people running spooky one shots because it's a pretty big club. There's a lot of kids, a couple dozen kids in it. And I will be running a spooky Western using the Savage Worlds system.
Yeehaw.
So I have in my mind, I have a pretty decent idea of what I want to do, but I haven't actually sat down to stat everything out and sketch maps and stuff like that. So I won't lie, I'm a little apprehensive just because this will be a different environment that I've run games in before. I've run lots of games for kids, so that doesn't intimidate me too much. But these are high schoolers, and high schoolers are high schoolers.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've talked a lot about running one shots on this podcast. So as I've been thinking through what to run, I've been trying to think what we've had guests come on and give all sorts of great tips about like how to run good one shots. So what were those tips again? So I need to go back and listen to some of our past episodes, but just trying to get something that will be punchy and playable in a couple of hours, and leaving some space to teach people the system. I picked Savage Worlds because it's not very complicated, but you still have to spend at least one encounter, like kind of ramping everybody up on how to use the rules. So we'll see.
Yeah, that's great. We were joking on the Discord about like your costume that you could wear for that. Yes. And like, which is really interesting to me because like I was thinking about it today, like something about the Wild West just like begs for people to dress up in a way that other game systems like, well, you could dress up if you wanted to, but like Wild West, it seems like you'd be missing a golden opportunity to not show up in like with a sheriff's badge.
Yeah, you are so right. It's such a costumey period of history, at least in our popular imagination.
Yes, yeah.
So, yeah, I have to identify whatever the line is. It would be fun to go in with some sort of props or costume, but I am also dealing with the judgiest age group, the judgiest and like least gracious age group that I'm aware of, at least.
Yeah.
So it has to be funny and not like distracting for the kids. So I don't know.
What I would want to do is have different colored hats, right? So like a white cowboy hat and a black cowboy hat, and like swap them depending on like if you're playing the villain or not. You could get really fun because I mean like the teenagers already think you're a huge dork and don't like you, so you might as well ham it up and have as much fun as possible. This is going to be a situation where as long as you're having fun, they'll decide whether or not they're going to have fun.
So what would be most fun for me is if there are some props or gimmicks or something like that the kids get to handle and use. So there's some simple ones that like go well with the Savage World system. Like I'll have poker chips to represent like kind of action points. And there will be a playing card deck and I'll assign one of the kids to kind of be the dealer. Off the top of your head, are there any like Wild Westy things that would be fun to be like, oh, you get to pin this sheriff badge on you during this scene, or like that sort of thing?
Oh, this is absurd, and you probably can't get it together beforehand, but I wonder how much it would cost to buy some of those like beer bottles that are like breakable, like the sugar made of sugar. Like and whether or not they actually hurt when you break them over someone's head, because that would be really fun if you each gave them one of those to like smash each other with or to break on the table. Yeah.
Okay, that's too good of an idea for this world, I think.
Yeah. So maybe look into that.
They would be broken within 7 seconds of handing them to a high schooler. But yes.
Just okay. Yeah, maybe so you bring like 2 sets, right? So one is the practice one. Yeah, I think like a sheriff's badge would be good. It's at school, so you should not bring like a replica 6 shooter with you.
You know, that's actually kind of a bummer because the guns of the Wild West era are so iconic, and they're such pieces of art, you know, to look at. It's a bummer I cannot bring in some Wild West guns.
Yeah.
Of course I'm not going to do it. I would be insane. But like, it is a bummer that we live in a world where, that's obviously.
Yeah, I'm just imagining Andy walking in with like a long duster, and he opens it up. It's just lined with like those toy like cap guns with like the orange chips. I'm trying to think of like other stuff. I mean, I think you're right on with the poker chips and the playing cards. I think like sheriff's badge would be really cool. Like a lasso would be cool. That's
an interesting idea too.
I mean, we were joking about one of those toy horses on a stick, which I still think is a good idea.
Yes.
Like you could do, depending on what the setting is, you could do a lot with like panning for gold as well. Like if you really wanted like a meaty prop, you could have like a bin full of dirt with some fake gold in there.
So they will be interacting with some prospectors. In the adventure. So that is something I hadn't thought about. That's interesting.
Yeah, like I don't know how you would do that in the game where it doesn't just become like messy or whatever, you know, messy like that. That could be really fun.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. Well, this is
so the more I hear about this, the more I want you to run it for me. It's like it sounds super fun.
Well, I'll tell you what, if it goes well and I have a good time running it, I'll extend an offer to run it again for you and anyone else who's interested. So.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, we should wrap up. So,
Yep.
Yeah, thanks everybody for listening. This was a bit more of a heartfelt episode, I think, than some of the other ones. So yeah, please let us know what any of your feedback is on it. We'd like to hear it, especially if you're feeling some of the same stuff that we're feeling. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. But yeah, and we have you can either reach out directly to us. There's also a Discord.
So here's a very dumb question that we really ought to have figured out. So what is the best way for someone who's listening, who's not already a member of our little kind of online community, to find us and talk to us?
Oh, that is a super good question. And I think the answer for that is if you go to our website, so gmdiscussions.com, I think rollfortopic.com will actually also get you there. There is a tab on the website for contact, and you can do that. You can contact us that way. I think it just has our email addresses there. Yeah, so you can reach out. We check our email regularly, right? So those will actually get to us. Alternative is to start your own podcast and invite us on as guests. I guess you could contact us that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think neither Andy are like super active on Twitter or anything like that. So email's best there.
Awesome. All right. Well, hey, Chris, it's been fun chatting about something a little bit different.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
And remember, if your player's having fun, you're a great GM.